Good morning, everybody. My name is Doug, and I'm an alcoholic. Just to start off with, for all the moms here, happy Mother's Day. In thinking about this, it's what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. What it was like was, it was frightening, it was exhilarating, it was tragic, it was joyous. There were all the emotions, all the adjectives you want to put into it. But I think at the end of the day, the word that sums it up in my case is unmanageable. That is what it was like. It was totally unmanageable. So without further ado, I'll dive into what happened. And I'm going to start right from the beginning because it all makes sense to me anyway. I was born in 1955 in northern Rhodesia, a colony of the British Empire at that stage. And I was born up in the Copperbelt. I was an orphan. I was adopted shortly after birth. And I have another sibling, not a blood relation. That's my sister. She's 2 years older than me. She was adopted here in South Africa, and myself up in northern Rhodesia. Life up there was on the Copperbelt. It was really the far north. It was a mining town and everything that went with it. And it was a fantastic existence. It was really fantastic. And I was bullied at school. I didn't mix well with kids. I didn't mix well with other people. I preferred my own company, and I sought my own company as much as I possibly could. Time went on, and a turning point for me was when I was 6 years old. I was given my first air rifle. And this actually set me free to a large degree, in as much as that I now had a weapon that I could go into the bush with, because the bush was very thick there. It was right in the middle of 15 miles from the Congo border. And I used to go into the bush by myself with my little pellet gun and go and hunt birds. And I had all the imagination going. I was a big game hunter. I was a white hunter. I was running a safari. I was doing all kinds of mean and nasty, ugly things. But in actual fact, what it did was gave me an excuse to run away from dealing with people, dealing with my problems, even at that young age. Little did I know that I thought I was by myself, but our gardener for about 2 years used to follow me wherever I went, and I thought I was totally alone, but I never was. And at school I did all right. Education-wise, not bad. I got through, I did my grades, the grades were good. Then when I was 7, I was 7, Heather was 9, our folks called us in and explained to us that we were adopted. And I didn't actually know what it meant, and they were at pains to explain that, they're not our real parents, but they are our parents, and I was completely confused, and I didn't accept it. I was not willing to accept it. And that stayed with me for many, 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 many years. And I actually turned it to my advantage wherever I could at a later stage and as I went through life. Just as an example of where I was at that time, is I was informed about something called inheritance. At 7 years old, inheritance. And it was explained to me that if someone in your family dies, it's quite possible that they're going to leave you something. So I got this bee in my bonnet, and I thought, okay, you're not my real folks. My real folks aren't here. They're dead. Therefore, I should get inheritance. And for 2 years, I drove my mother absolutely insane, demanding, when is my inheritance coming? I didn't know what it would be, whether it's money or a chair or a book or whatever it was, but I just wanted my inheritance. I wanted it. Gimme, gimme, gimme. My sister, on the other hand, she said, okay, yeah, no, that's great. She came back from school one day and says, listen, I'm tired of being adapted. My mum said, what? I'm tired of being adapted. I'm adapted, I'm adapted, I'm adapted. And that was her done. She finished with it, accepted it, and moved on. I couldn't get my head around it. When I was 9, I was sent down to boarding school here in Pietermaritzburg at Morris Brothers College, a Catholic school. And I'd been christened or baptized as a Catholic. And this was my first view of religion or organized religion that I'd ever had. We didn't have religion in our family. My dad was a Mason. My mom was a Methodist. But yeah, I came down to St. Charles College, and from the first moment I was there, I hated every single day that I was in that school. Every day. But I still had to go through all the processes of catechism and confirmation and the whole 9 yards, altar boy and choir and all that. But my whole view of God and everything was the God of that religion, was the God, the biblical God. And that biblical God was pretty vengeful, and you either went to heaven or you went to hell, or if you got a suspended sentence, you went to limbo. And it was cut and dry. If you didn't believe, you were going to hell. That's it, end of story. So as far as spirituality is concerned, it was negative. I was there for 5 years. I was 14. I ran away. And the penalty for running away in those days was to be expelled. Now, then when you got expelled, it wasn't just a case of, oh gosh, now you've got to go and find a new school. It was actually quite a heavy process to deal with. Anyway, I moved up to Johannesburg and I stayed with my aunt and uncle, and there's 6 children, so I made number 7. And I went and I attended Roosevelt High, which was a co-ed government school. Now, I've just come from 5 years in a Catholic all-boys boarding school into a co-ed school, government school, in Standard 7. I failed Standard 7. My folks moved down from Zambia and settled on the East Rand in Springs, and I attended Springs Boys High for the remainder of my schooling. An interesting thing happened there is that because I was a Zambian citizen, I had to be naturalized into South Africa in order to remain in the country. So at 17 years old, I had to go and stand in front of 2 magistrates and be classified. And they went through a whole kind of procedure, no holds barred. And I finally got a piece of paper, which I've got somewhere still, that classified me white. And that gave me access to all kinds of stuff, schooling, medical, everything. After school, I did pretty well at school. I passed, and I'd always been keen on conservation in the bush and got to it whenever I could. And they were running the first national diploma in nature conservation and management that had ever been run in Southern Africa. And I applied and I got into it, and we started with the trial project of running the 3-year national diploma. And it was here that I actually got introduced to alcohol. I hadn't used alcohol at all. I didn't like what it had done. My father was an alcoholic. And through my dad being an alcoholic and my mum being a diabetic and ill all the time, there was constant friction, and I didn't like the way things were turning out The family became completely dysfunctional, and so I just didn't even experiment with alcohol until I got to college. And there I had no holds barred. I could just carry on and do what I liked. And I was introduced to alcohol and I loved it. I thought this was the best thing since sliced cheese. And I dove straight into it, and straight away I went to excess. No control, no limits, no nothing. It was excess. It was top shelf or nothing. Anyway, I went through college. The first 18 months, we had 18 months full-time study, and I did very well on that. I then moved to the Orange Free State as a ranger, and I was zone officer in the Free State, and I worked all over. I was in charge of about a third of the Free State, doing zone work, liaising with farmers, doing game capture, delivering game, whatever. And I didn't drink while I was in the Free State at all. It just didn't occur to me because I had very few friends. It was just myself and my game scout called Petros in Tundown. He was a fantastic guy. And we just used to cruise around the Free State, camp wherever we wanted to, saw some incredible country, met some incredible people, real characters, and it was brilliant. I was based in Bloemfontein, Kroonstad, and then lastly up at Denaysville, which is the border affairs village on the Vaal Dam itself, on the wall. After a year, I was offered a job with Natal Parks Board. Came down, did the interview, and got the job. I moved down to Natal, and funny enough, my first station was Vernon Crook's Nature Reserve, which is just down the road here. And in those days, it was a fully functional little nature reserve that had come from Vernon Crook's himself, and had been walled when he passed on. It had been walled to Natal Parks Board as long as they managed it. And I was there for 6 months, and then I got called up into the Navy and to do my national service. I had a great time in the Navy. I enjoyed my national service, but I drank like an absolute fish, and at any opportunity that I could have. And once I'd finished my 2 years, I came back to Natal Parks Board, and I went up to Pulse Bay Park on Lake St. Lucia. And there I had the hardest boss I've ever come across. And his name, unfortunately, happened to be Dick. But we became very good friends. We became very good friends, and he taught me a tremendous amount about conservation and practical management in the bush. While I was at Pulse Bay was when I met Jill, his wife, and I then got transferred from Pulse Bay to Ndumu, which is right up on the Mozambique border. And we got married and we moved into the house at Ndumu. Now in Ndumu I was a zone officer again, but it gave me huge scope in as much as that I did game capture. I ran the turtle survey at Bunganek, the research station at Bunganek. I was taught to be a skipper. I learned to scuba dive. I dived in the same waters where they discovered the coelacanths off Savannah. That's absolutely phenomenal stuff. And I saw some country that some people have never seen. They didn't have the opportunity or won't have the opportunity to see it. Meantime, every opportunity I could get, I drank. And once again, to excess. Fortunately, at that stage, the nearest bottle store was 175 kilometers away, over horrendous roads. So it wasn't just a case of popping around the corner to go and get yourself a cold six-pack. It didn't work that way. And there was no local shebeen at that stage. So yeah, it was an on and off, hit and miss type thing. I then got promoted and transferred to the Shlibi-Ampolosi complex, which was fantastic. But the problem was, well, I felt that the problem was, is that I didn't go across there as a second in charge or a section ranger for this section or whatever. I went in there as a senior ranger without portfolio. In other words, I didn't have a set position. And I took that as a slight. No, they're really bad-mouthing me here. They're not giving me a position. Meantime, they just promoted me, but they're not giving me a position. So I resigned and I left. I went up to Johannesburg and I went into base mineral mining with my father-in-law. Bad mistake. And that was extremely interesting. I'll give you two quick examples. One, we had a talc mine, talcum powder, baby powder, and it comes out in huge, bright, bottle green rocks. I mean, monster rocks that we used to mine underground. You take it, you mill it, and it turns white. And that's how they get talcum powder. And then the second one, which is our biggest thing, was cat litter. You know, the cat sand you buy in the supermarkets? We used to mine tons and tons and tons of cat litter and sell it everywhere. Also in the agricultural sector. I bought 10 acres out of a place called Farmall, which is a suburb of Fourways. Developed that 10 acres, built a house, put in water reticulation, the whole 9 yards. And I became very, very unhappy at work. And instead of once again confronting the problem, I ran and I drank. Then in 1981, I attempted suicide. It was fairly close to being successful, but obviously it wasn't. But the upshot of that is that I was put on psychiatric meds for the first time in 1981. And that has continued for many, many, many years. After 5 years in Joburg, I moved back into conservation, moved down to KwaZulu. And KwaZulu was a separate homeland in those days, separate from Natal. And I was working for the KwaZulu outfit. And I continued to drink much as I could, and when I could. I was stationed in Maputoland, which is up north as well, living in Jacini to start with. Then I moved to a place called Manzangwenyo, which is halfway between Sodwana Bay and Cozy Bay, right on the beach. A very small little outpost, and I ran the Coastal Forest Reserve, the seashore, and the sea itself up to 200 k's out to territorial waters. And that was fantastic. Once again, I was back in the turtles, I was diving again. I was skippering a boat again, and it was fantastic, but I was on a lot of psychiatric medication, and I was drinking on top of that as much as I possibly could. And I thought everything was fine. I had control of this. Everything was good. After, call it 12 and a half years of marriage, I blew it. I met another lady, and it was a ships passing in the night issue, but instead of keeping my mouth shut, I opened my mouth and thought I was doing the right thing by exposing it, and it wasn't the right thing to expose, and that caused all kinds of ruckus. We got divorced, and by that action alone, I decimated that family. Decimated. Not just hurt them, decimated them. I broke jaw, I broke my oldest son, Jeb, and I broke my daughter, Kelly. And I just carried on drinking, carried on using. I stayed like that for 2 years, which was absolutely horrendous. I thought I was having a really good time, but in actual fact I wasn't having a good time. I then met Sarah, and we decided to get married. Poor Sarah. And we went forward, and when independence came, KwaZulu and Natal combined, and the two conservation units combined, and I had the option of either staying with conservation or going into environmental affairs. So I went into environmental affairs. It was a new challenge, new legislation had just come out because of independence, and it was starting something on the ground floor, which appealed to me. However, the drinking and the using continued at a pace. There were other times where I tried to commit suicide, but that was for attention seeking. And obviously they weren't successful. But the trauma that it caused in the family was excessive. Sarah and myself had 2 boys, Matthew and Dougie. And once again, 12 and a half years, 13 years. I'd stopped drinking in 2001. And I thought, just by me stopping to drink, I'd solved my half of the problem. Now everybody else must be gung-ho, well done, Doug, pat on the back every 5 seconds. You're doing superbly, you're such a star chap. Meantime, back at the ranch, there was no ways that I was anywhere near a star chap. The psych meds increased. As I get one, there'd be a side effect, and I get another one to hit that, and so it just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. And it was on a continuous basis. There were no breaks in between. It was continuous. Anyway, the maggot turned, and Sarah divorced me. So it was sort of karma come back and hit me on the back of the head. I then had to move out of the house and off the farm and into Howick. And lo and behold, who did I have to move in with? But my father, an active alcoholic, and we had no relationship whatsoever, nothing. And that was a really hectic period in my life. And I'd become involved with Alcoholics Anonymous. And if it hadn't have been for that fellowship in Howick West, I don't think I'd be here today, because they helped me cope with living with my dad. Just by talking to me, just by saying, listen, you can do this, just take it one day at a time, just slowly, slowly, slowly. And that small fellowship, I was the only white member in that fellowship. It was absolutely amazing. It was fantastic. And I started doing service, setting out chairs, coffee, tea, secretary, chairman, all the way. And I enjoyed every minute of it. Then the wheels fell off. I wasn't drinking, but the medication wasn't working as well as I thought it should work. So I decided, well, I can change the way I take this medication. And I started dosing myself with medication. And there'd be times where I'd use a month's supply in a week, or I'd go the full month, or whatever. But whatever it was abusive of psych meds. I ended up in going to Town Hill, first of all to North Park twice, and then into the lockup wards twice, because I just lost the plot completely. No alcohol involved, but completely unmanageable on medication. After the last 2 at Town Hill in the lockup wards, it was suggested that I move into a halfway house that was connected to a rehabilitation centre, which I agreed to. Unfortunately, that halfway house does not practice any program whatsoever, and I just existed there. The members in the fellowship here who knew me in those days, and I was a troglodyte. I lived in a room in the detox centre. I spent my entire time living in the detox centre, which was quite an eye-opener, to say the least. Anyway, I went there for a long time, and then I was offered the opportunity to get my own place down here in Milton Training, Port Shepson, and I jumped at that. An interesting aside there was, in order to buy the cottage, I had to get a letter of residence stating what period of time I'd been in the halfway house. And I thought, no, well, that's no problem. I was there 3.5 years. I got the letter. I looked at the dates, and I'd been there 4.5 years. So I'd lost a year somewhere, and to this day I have no idea where it went to, but it's gone. I lost a year. Anyway, I moved down to Milton Training, and it was very exciting. It was a new, lovely little cottage on Eco Estate. Oh, it was fantastic. 6 months after moving into that cottage, I decided that I had enough control now that I could have a beer. And that was my bundle. That was it. And it took off faster than anything that I can actually think of, and worse than what it was before. Much, much worse. And it just showed that the progression of this disease carries on with me. No matter what, it's going to be there, that there will be this progression. Come the end of 2017, I was on meds and alcohol, and I went into blackout, and I caused an accident. And the result of that accident was that a 9.5-year-old school child was killed, and a 10.5-year-old school child was put into hospital in critical condition. I was charged with culpable homicide, drunken driving, and restless driving. For what reason? It was somebody looking over me. The case was withdrawn. It wasn't dismissed, it was withdrawn, which means that it can be re-established at any time. We then move on into January of 2018. On the 25th of January, at about 10 o'clock at night, we had armed robbers come into the cottage, and there was a home invasion, and they cleaned us out. Laptops, cell phones, hi-fi system, you name it, they took it. And they left. Luckily, no one was hurt. And the only reason that no one was hurt is that my son Matthew was staying with us, or was staying with me at the time. And he took charge of the situation, and he calmed it down, and he made it so that nobody got hurt. So it was all his doing that no one got hurt. Next morning at about 9 o'clock, knock on the door. I got to answer the door, and there's the caretaker of the park, and a friend of mine, Eric. And he's standing there and he's crying. And I thought, what the hell has Eric done now? And I asked him what was going on. And he informed me that my youngest son, Dougie, who was not yet 21, had died of a heart attack that morning. It was gobsmacking. It was incredible. I can remember just going completely numb. I couldn't feel, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. We had no communications, I had no cell phones, I had no computer, I had no transport because I'd written the transport off. So basically stuck. Anyway, we got through it, did the memorial for Dougie, got that all sorted out, but I just couldn't manage. I really couldn't manage. I thought I could, but it was obvious to everybody else that I couldn't. And that's where it came in once again, that God working through other people, my family, my sister, friends, did for me what I could not do for myself. And I agreed to go into treatment, and I thought it was going to be like the previous stint, because I'd been in rehab before. 28 days. What a pleasure. I'll just dry out, I'll just chill a bit, and then I'll be good to go. Yeah, it didn't work out that way, not quite anyway. Going into treatment was a real eye-opener. I'd read the big book, I'd read the steps, I'd read the stories in the back. They were the most important to me at the time because I didn't understand the program. I had no idea what the program was. I didn't know what a sponsor was. I didn't know what service was. Although I did service, I didn't know that it was an actual thing that gets done in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I went in there and I arrived, and I was broken. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I was finished. I really, really hit a block that I couldn't go over and or around. But one thing I didn't realize is that I was totally spiritually bankrupt, completely. And in the early days in my treatment, it was more a case of getting the physical side right, trying to get my physical being right, because without that I couldn't continue. And that slowly started to come right. Then the next thing was to look at the mental side of it. I'm still mental, but to look at the mental side of it, and the suggestion was to wean off all medication. I agreed to that, and it was done very systematically. It was done very well. I was petrified. I didn't really want to do it, but I thought, no, well, let's have a look-see, and I went for it, and it's turned out to be a fantastic blessing. It really has. So on the 1st of May last year was my first clean and sober day in 37 years. And that, to me, was quite phenomenal. At the same time, I was doing the steps to the best of my ability. Some of them might have been average, others not so good. But I gave it my best shot. And started going into, if you know it, started going into Don's group. The first 2-3 weeks, I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Nothing. It just went completely over the top of my head. But the more I listened, the more I heard feedback from the group, the more I slowly started to get a glimmer of what the spiritual aspect of this program is all about. And I'm still finding that out, and I think at the end of my days I'll still be finding that out. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, I went through the steps. It was suggested, no, don't do 28 days, do 3 months, and I agreed to do that. And then it just got added on. Oh no, are you still happy? I don't, no, I'm happy, okay, you're staying another month. And so it carried on. So at the end of the time, I'd done 8.5 months at the house on the hill, and it was the longest 28 days of my life. But without that time spent in treatment, there is no way in hell that I would be anywhere near where I sit today. There's just absolutely no way. After my time up on the hill, I was made the very generous offer to move down into a halfway house, which I accepted, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I moved down to Baisley Beach, and I was greeted by Dom. I have to mention you, Dom, who's helped me settle in, showed me the ropes, showed me where this was, showed me where that was, and really went out of his way to assist me to settle in as best as I could. And it's been an absolute privilege. It's no right to be in the halfway house. It's an absolute privilege to be given to someone, to be able to still be affiliated with the treatment centre, but just in a different aspect. What has a year's recovery given me? One, it's given me a lot better physical and mental stamina and mold, if I can put it that way. It's helped me tremendously emotionally, because I don't think I would have coped without having, first of all, the counsellors and my sponsor helping me, and then the group in the house itself helping me, and then coming into the fellowship and having the fellowship also accept me and help me. All that support has been absolutely fundamental in where I am today. And there are a number of things that I really love about this program. The first one, and to me is highly important, is that my God is the God of my understanding. I get to choose my higher power. And that to me is it's a phenomenal thing. It gives so much freedom. And the beauty of the thing is it's not static. To me, it's not static. It can develop as it goes along. It doesn't have to be one and end of story. It can change, it can adapt. And that is fantastic. The second thing I love about the program is the paradox of the program. Is all in all, if you broke it down logically and put it all together and everything, it shouldn't work. Absolutely shouldn't work. But it does. And that is the paradox, is that it's just so outlandish that everybody will write it off and say, negative, this cannot work. But then when it's applied, bang, it does work. I'm not putting myself out as an example, but I have been given examples of people that are living in recovery for long, long periods of time by using this program. And it's because of the program that they continue to progress. So there is tangible proof. It's right there in front of me. I can see it. I can see my hand. And another big thing for me as well is that it's a new way of life, which for, 63 years, I never thought that I would change. I didn't think I'd have to change. I didn't want to change because I was quite happy with my defects and everything. They were familiar territory, and I could retreat into those defects at any stage and justify my way around any situation. I'm trying my best not to do that anymore. I don't always get it right. I don't think I'll get the program right all the time, but all I can do is be willing and to try. And I'm most grateful for being here today. I'm most grateful to my sponsor Keith. I'm grateful to all the counsellors at the house in the hill. But I'm most grateful to you people today for accepting me for what I am, for who I am. And yeah, and that's about it. And all I'd like to say is I wish you all that you go from strength to strength, one day at a time. Thanks for letting me share.